I've been struggling to find motivation and a reason to live in a world where free will doesn't exist. I'm sure when you discovered that free will is an illusion, you must have had a similar experience, so how do you deal with that? Well, this is quite a popular question, right? I get asked this quite a lot, and it's quite a serious one if it's really troubling you to the extent that you're struggling to find meaning in life. But this didn't happen to me, and I don't think it should happen, and I don't think it makes sense to say that because free will doesn't exist, therefore any meaning that once was in your life now has to disappear. One of the most interesting things about the psychology of free will to me is that it's impossible to not kind of live with that illusion that you do have free will. I mean, I can fully rationalize the idea that free will is ultimately an illusion, but it still feels like I have it. And I think that at least part of the reason for that is that although you don't exactly get to choose what you want, this is kind of the anti-free will argument, you do get to do what you want. Right? So the anti-free will argument is that, yeah, you can do whatever you want, but you don't get to control what you want. But you still get that feeling of agency, because although you don't control what you do want to do is what determines your action, right? So the thing that's determining your action is, at least in some sense, or at least in one level, interior to you. It's part of yourself. It's part of your desires. The very argument against free will is that you'll always do what you want, right? You're going to pursue pleasures, and you're going to avoid things that you think will bring you suffering and this kind of stuff. But interestingly, I think that if you ask someone who believes in free will, probably needs to be an atheist for this to be reliably the case, but if you ask them what they think brings them meaning in life, what is it that infuses their life with meaning, they'll probably say something like, well, I like pursuing pleasures. The pursuit of happiness is one of the things detailed in the Declaration of Independence for a reason, because it's seen as one of the most important ways in which a human being can find meaning and purpose in life. And the anti-free will argument doesn't remove that. It further entrenches it. It says that the very defining thing about your actions and who you are as a person is the pursuit of these pleasures and the avoidance of these sufferings. So if before you were convinced that free will doesn't exist, that's where you found meaning, where I think a lot of people do find it, then nothing's changed. It would only need to change if before you were convinced that free will didn't exist, you found your meaning through something to do with choice and being the author of your action. But I think it's vague and strange to say something like, the meaning and purpose I have in life comes from the fact that absolutely nothing outside of myself is determining my action. I think like a sentence like that said in isolation or out of context would sound absolutely bizarre. Don't get me wrong, I understand the intuition that it's troubling and uncomfortable to be convinced that you're not ultimately in control of your actions, but the idea that it needs to remove meaning, that's only true, in my view, if you had previously a kind of weird definition of what meaning is. Every time that I've spoken to an atheist and asked them what brings them meaning and purpose, they've answered with things which are completely compatible, if not reinforced by an anti-free will philosophy. So hopefully thinking along those lines will help you to come to terms with finding meaning in a world without free will, but just recognize that you're perfectly capable of finding that meaning. And if you can't, I don't think it was a problem with free will. I think it's a problem with something else, right? I think, in other words, if you can't find meaning in pursuing pleasures and these kinds of things, then I think you'd have struggled to find meaning even if free will did exist.